Hello everyone, welcome to TCOM at Ball State. I'm Dr. Mike Gerhard. In this video I want to talk about how the values and morality in media have evolved over time. The media world today is nothing like the 1950s, for example, which was a much more innocent time. Back in the 1950s, in a great show like I Love Lucy, the married people slept in separate beds. They didn't even use the word pregnant on the show. Okay, and they certainly didn't depict sex outside of a marriage. Now that's changed a lot. Today you see almost everything in today's media world. So what accounts for this? Why have things shifted so much? Well, I want to share with you a theory that attempts to explain how we have more and more excesses in media content and where we might be going in the future. All right, now think about it. What content in the movies, the video games, movies, music, have you seen lately that would make your parents or grandparents cringe? Make them say, "What are you watching?" There's a lot of this content out there, of course. Okay, whether it's in music, or advertising, or film, or video games. Okay? We could go on and talk about examples of excessive media content, especially in terms of sex and violence. Okay? So we live in a hypersexualized, kind of hyper-violence-based media environment. Okay? And this has important consequences, I think. So we need to talk about this issue of morality in the media. Okay, now why, in the face of a lot of criticism, do the media companies continue to produce excessive content? Why does the content in this country's mass communication industry continue to evolve towards what appears to be increasing levels of poor taste and lower standards in terms of morality? Why does that happen? Well, the answers are interesting, I think, if we examine this question. Why does content continue to get more excessive? Okay. Sex, violence, crime, vulgarity, sensationalism, mocking religion, all of this seems to have increased over the last few decades. So I want to introduce you to a very interesting theory called the creeping cycle of desensitization theory. The creeping cycle of desensitization. All right, this theory comes from a mass communications scholar named Melvin DeFleur. And he wrote about this in a book published back in 2010 called Mass Communication Theories. Okay, now what does he mean by desensitization? What does that mean? Well, if we turn to the dictionary, desensitization means to lessen the sensitiveness of something or to make it more indifferent or unaware or the like in feeling. So the theory here is that we become desensitized when violence and sex and strong language cease to be shocking to us. Okay? So we might see a lot of violence in the media, or for example, be exposed to one school shooting after another. And over time, we get numb. Many of us get numb. We lose a little of our humanity. We're unable to think, feel, or react normally. Okay? When something is shocking or upsetting. So this is the idea of desensitization. Okay? We get very kind of apathetic, this I don't care attitude. We don't react as strongly. All right, so let me back up a little bit and just talk for a few seconds on what is a theory. I'm going to present to you a theory that explains the excesses in media content. Well, first, what is a theory? This is a good definition of a theory. A theory is a set of related propositions, from which certain logical inferences or conclusions can be drawn. So a good theory should lay out some propositions which lead to logical conclusions. Okay, and a theory always attempts to either explain or predict something. That's the nature of the theory, to predict or explain. All right, now let's examine the creeping cycle of desensitization theory. This theory predicts that as long as capitalism is the dominant economic system in America, and as long as there is no strong and effective control of media content by the government, then the trend towards greater transgressions of conservative norms or more and more excessive content will continue in mass media as the years ahead unfold. So that's the basic prediction. Okay? And of course, all media in America is created and operates within the context of capitalism or the marketplace economy. So let's look at the various propositions that lead us to the conclusions in the creeping cycle of desensitization theory. First proposition: the communication industries that produce all the content in America do so within a system of economic capitalism. So you know capitalism is about profit. Making profits is essentially the highest approved goal in capitalism, making a profit. Now, making a profit on mass communication content follows the classic principles of competition and market-driven capitalism. You keep the cost down, offering a commodity or service or experience for which a maximum number of people will pay to use and enjoy the marketplace forces. Okay? So we have to consider the economic context in which mass communication and all kinds of communication occur in our society. Okay, now, in terms of the commercial value of media content, the type of products that tend to attract the largest number of paying customers are often those that emphasize socially controversial themes like sensationalism, sex, crime, violence, vulgarity, revenge. And we see this around us all the time in advertising and other forms of mass communication. Sex sells. We also have something called the First Amendment in our society, which guarantees freedom of expression. In the United States, due to the protections of the First Amendment to the Constitution, there are very few legal or political restraints on what content such media products can contain and be presented to the public. Very few rules because of the First Amendment. We have a high degree of freedom. Okay? So the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment gives us these incredible freedoms and responsibilities. Okay? The 45 words and the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment are so important for a democracy, a representative democracy. Okay? But the First Amendment states Congress shall make no law prohibiting freedom of speech, abridging freedom of speech or the press. Okay? So speech in America and commercial speech is very, very protected. Okay? And the Supreme Court has given the media a lot of protection over the years in a number of landmark cases. A great deal of media freedom in America. So, now, if there's not a lot of government control and regulation, then what's acceptable in the content is largely left to the audience taste and the cultural norms and the marketplace that define the kinds of content that people will or will not tolerate. It's left to the marketplace and to the public. Now, the largest audience category, providing the largest profits, from media are young people who care less for the conservative taste and the restraining cultural norms than do older people, as the young people actively seek pleasure and excitement in the entertainment content. So, this results in excessive content. Okay? You give freedom to people to operate under a capitalistic system, you will expect to get strong excesses in media content, whether it's in violence or sex or whatever the controversial content might be. Okay? So, for all of these reasons, producers of the content seeking ever larger profits in a really competitive but protected environment will constantly increase depictions of sensational topics until the public gets mad and there's a little backlash and members of the public and leaders start to protest and object or try to cancel certain forms of media content. Now, if the outcry threatens the industry, the producers will stop or temporarily reverse their transgressions of the norms. But this never lasts forever, because in a creeping cycle of desensitization, the producers will always move the cutting edge of transgressions forward again and again as soon as that public protest dies down and becomes muted. So they'll always return to pushing the boundaries, and this creeping cycle will continue. And we can see these excesses even in movies that promote Christian values. Okay, so what? So what are some of the possible unintended consequences of this creeping cycle of desensitization and more excessive content? Does the media environment of violence and profanity and crudeness and sex, does that erode our civility in our society by demeaning and displacing more positive social values? This is a critical question. You'll have to come to your own truth on this, but many of us see an obvious kind of crudening that's happening in our society today. So this has a bunch of moral and ethical dilemmas, okay, which you will consider in many of your courses here at Ball State. Now here's a question: how do we balance artistic freedom, the First Amendment, our artistic license, our freedom of speech? How do we balance that with the need to protect people, especially children, from strong content, objectionable content, excessive content? Well, in America, we use the ratings and filterings devices to help guarantee that the content reaches the intended audience. In America, we rely on ratings. Okay? And almost every form of media content, whether it's video games, music, movies, TV, is rated today to give us a heads up about the nature of the content. So let me summarize the creeping cycle of desensitization theory. This theory predicts that as long as capitalism is the dominant economic system in America, people are seeking profits, and as long as there is no strong and effective control of media content by the government, as long as we have a First Amendment, then the trend towards greater transgressions of conservative norms will continue in mass media as the years ahead unfold. So, I hope you got a little bit of value out of this lecture, or maybe you're more confused than ever. I'm not sure, but please continue to take care of yourself and each other, and practice all of those good public health measures and practices during the coronavirus crisis. I hope to see you soon. So long.